Have you ever wondered how the DNA of a population from over 1,000 years ago could still influence the way we live today? The Anglo-Saxons were more than just a chapter in Britain's history. They were the architects of profound cultural, social, and even genetic transformations. But here's the fascinating part. Their DNA holds secrets that have puzzled historians and scientists for centuries. What makes it so unique? Is it the story of mass migrations that reshaped the British Isles? The blending of ancient cultures through intermarriage? Or could it be the incredible technological breakthroughs that allow us to trace these stories through strands of ancient DNA? In this video, we'll uncover the mysteries of Anglo-Saxon genetics and how their legacy remains imprinted in modern Britain. From mass migrations to cultural fusion, their DNA offers a window into one of history's most transformative eras. So, if you've ever wanted to understand how the past shapes the present, or even the people you see around you, stay tuned. What you're about to learn might just change the way you see history forever. To understand what makes Anglo-Saxon DNA so unique, we need to journey back to the 5th century, a time when Britain was on the brink of transformation. The Roman Empire, which had ruled for nearly 4 centuries, had abandoned the island by 410 CE. What they left behind was a land in turmoil, a power vacuum ripe for change. Enter the Anglo-Saxons, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, who came from what is now Denmark, northern Germany, and the Netherlands. These were seafaring tribes, skilled warriors, and farmers who brought with them not just their tools and weapons, but also their culture, language, and, most importantly, their DNA. Historical accounts like those of the Venerable Bede tell us that these groups arrived in waves, establishing settlements and transforming Britain's linguistic and cultural landscape. But for centuries, one question loomed. How significant was their arrival? Were they conquerors who displaced the native Britons? Or were they just a small ruling elite, gradually influencing local communities? This debate persisted until recent advancements in genetic science gave us the ability to examine ancient DNA. The findings, far more dramatic than anyone imagined. Anglo-Saxon migrations didn't just influence Britain, they fundamentally reshaped its genetic foundation, particularly in the East. As we delve deeper into the genetic story of the Anglo-Saxons, you'll see how their arrival marked one of the most profound shifts in British history, one that can still be traced in the DNA of millions of people today. What truly sets Anglo-Saxon DNA apart is how it represents one of the most significant genetic transformations in British history. Scientists analyzing ancient DNA from skeletons have uncovered something astonishing. By the early Middle Ages, over 75% of the ancestry of people in eastern England came from regions across the North Sea, including modern-day Denmark, the Netherlands, and northern Germany. This genetic shift is striking because it's a dramatic departure from what came before. Before the Anglo-Saxon migrations, Britain's population was largely Celtic in ancestry, shaped by millennia of local traditions and earlier influences, including the Romans. But the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons brought a wave of northern European genetics that blended with the local population, creating something entirely new. What's even more fascinating is the precision of these discoveries. Using advanced ancient DNA techniques, researchers extracted genetic material from nearly 500 individuals from across Britain and Europe. They found that early Anglo-Saxon DNA had a unique fingerprint, closely tied to the coastal regions bordering the North Sea. In other words, their DNA reveals exactly where they came from and how they spread across Britain. But what makes this DNA so unique isn't just where it came from. It's how it blended with the existing population. Unlike earlier migrations that often left little genetic trace, the Anglo-Saxon arrival fundamentally reshaped the genetic makeup of Britain, particularly in eastern and southern England. The result? A population that was not only diverse but regionally distinct. Even today, you can see this genetic legacy in modern Britons. The DNA of people in eastern England, for example, still retains a stronger Anglo-Saxon signature than those in the West. This blend of local and migrant DNA is one of the most fascinating aspects of this story. And it's just the beginning of what their genetics can reveal. For centuries, historians and archaeologists have debated the scale of the Anglo-Saxon migration. Were they a small, elite group that imposed their culture on the local Britons? Or was it a large-scale migration that completely transformed the population? Earlier theories suggested that only a small number of Anglo-Saxon warriors arrived and gradually spread their influence through power and status. But this theory left many unanswered questions. Why would the genetic makeup of Eastern England show such a massive shift? And why do historical records like those from the Venerable Bede describe the arrival of entire tribes, not just soldiers? The real breakthrough came with the advent of ancient DNA analysis. By sequencing the genomes of hundreds of early medieval skeletons, scientists uncovered undeniable evidence. This wasn't just a trickle of migrants, it was a flood. Entire families, including men, women, and children, traveled across the North Sea to settle in Britain. Their DNA tells us that this was a large-scale migration that fundamentally reshaped the genetic landscape. Cemeteries like those in Buckland and Oakington provide even more insight. Here, researchers discovered graves containing both Anglo-Saxon migrants and local Britons, buried side by side. This suggests that the migration wasn't simply a violent takeover. Instead, there was intermarriage and cultural blending, leading to a more complex and nuanced integration. What's even more intriguing is the role women played in this migration. Genetic evidence reveals that women were just as involved as men, traveling with their families and contributing equally to the genetic legacy. This challenges the traditional narrative of male-dominated invasions and highlights the importance of entire communities in shaping this transformative period. In the end, the evidence points to a migration on an unprecedented scale, one that was both cultural and biological. The Anglo-Saxon story is no longer about a small elite imposing their will. It's about waves of people who came to Britain, intermingled with the locals, and left an indelible mark on history and genetics. One of the most fascinating aspects of Anglo-Saxon DNA is how its influence varied across Britain. The genetic legacy of these migrants wasn't uniform. It was shaped by geography, culture, and local dynamics. In Eastern England, the heartland of Anglo-Saxon settlement, their genetic impact was the most profound. Studies show that up to 76% of the ancestry of early medieval populations in this region came from northern European migrants. This is where the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes established their largest settlements, and their DNA became deeply embedded in the local population. But as you move westward, the story changes. In areas like Wales, Scotland, and Western England, the genetic influence of the Anglo-Saxons diminishes significantly. These regions retained a much stronger connection to their Celtic ancestry, with far less integration of Anglo-Saxon DNA. For example, at Worth Matravers in Dorset, researchers found almost no evidence of continental ancestry, showing that some communities remained relatively untouched by the migration. Even within Anglo-Saxon settlements, there were variations. At Appledown in Sussex, for instance, burials revealed a stark divide between people of local ancestry and those of migrant origin. These two groups were buried with distinct practices, suggesting some level of social separation. Contrast that with sites like Buckland in Kent, where Anglo-Saxon migrants and locals intermarried and were buried together, reflecting a higher degree of integration. This regional variation tells a nuanced story. The Anglo-Saxon migration wasn't a one-size-fits-all event. In some areas, it led to widespread integration and cultural blending. In others, local populations maintained their distinct identities. What's remarkable is how these patterns are still reflected in modern DNA. People in Eastern England today retain a stronger Anglo-Saxon genetic signature, while those in the West are more closely tied to ancient Celtic populations. This diversity is a testament to the complex and varied ways in which the Anglo-Saxon migrations shaped Britain, and it underscores just how unique their DNA truly is. When we think of migration in the early Middle Ages, it's easy to imagine armies of men crossing the seas in search of new lands. But the reality of the Anglo-Saxon migration tells a very different story, one in which women played a crucial and often overlooked role. Genetic studies reveal something remarkable. The migration wasn't just about warriors or elite men. Entire families made the journey from regions like Denmark, northern Germany, and the Netherlands. The evidence is clear. Women were just as present as men in these migrations, and they played an essential role in shaping the genetic and cultural legacy of Anglo-Saxon Britain. One of the most fascinating discoveries comes from the burial sites. Women of Anglo-Saxon descent were often buried with elaborate grave goods, such as brooches, beads, and ornate jewelry, signifying high social status. This contrasts with women of local ancestry, who were less frequently buried with such items. It suggests that women from migrant families may have held prominent roles within their communities, possibly as cultural or social leaders. Take, for example, the findings from sites like Oakington and Dover Buckland. In these cemeteries, researchers uncovered graves of Anglo-Saxon women adorned with intricate items that highlight their importance. These women weren't just passive participants in migration. They were integral to the formation of new communities. But it wasn't only about material wealth. The DNA evidence shows that women were pivotal in the integration between Anglo-Saxon migrants and local Britons. Through intermarriage, they helped bridge two distinct genetic and cultural groups, blending them into a shared heritage. Family trees reconstructed from ancient DNA reveal generations of mixed ancestry, with women passing on their genetic legacy and cultural practices. What's particularly striking is how these findings challenge traditional narratives of male-dominated invasions. The Anglo-Saxon migration wasn't a story of conquerors and the conquered. It was a story of entire communities, where women played an equal and vital role in shaping the future. The presence and contributions of women are a key reason why the Anglo-Saxon migration was so transformative, both genetically and culturally. Without them, the unique legacy of the Anglo-Saxons wouldn't have been possible. One of the most captivating aspects of the Anglo-Saxon migration is how it reshaped the social and cultural fabric of Britain. This wasn't a simple story of conquest or domination. It was one of interaction, integration, and, in some cases, separation. As Anglo-Saxon migrants arrived and settled, they didn't remain isolated. Evidence from burial sites shows that local Britons and new arrivals often lived side by side. At cemeteries like Buckland in Kent and Oakington in Cambridgeshire, graves of individuals with local and migrant ancestry are found together, indicating a high degree of social integration. In these communities, intermarriage blurred the lines between the two groups, creating a shared genetic and cultural identity. But integration wasn't universal. At Appledown in Sussex, the story is different. People with Anglo-Saxon ancestry were buried separately from those with local ancestry, using distinct burial styles. This suggests that, in some regions, social boundaries remained intact for generations. These variations tell us that integration wasn't a uniform process. It depended on local dynamics, cultural preferences, and even the fortunes of individual families. What's especially fascinating is how this cultural exchange went both ways. Anglo-Saxon migrants brought with them new traditions, languages, and technologies that transformed Britain. Their distinctive burial practices, clothing styles, and even agricultural methods became widespread. At the same time, local Britons retained elements of their own identity, such as Celtic place names and artistic styles, which persisted alongside these new influences. Family trees reconstructed through ancient DNA provide a vivid picture of this blending. In one case at Buckland, researchers traced a family over 4 generations, showing how a woman with local ancestry married into an Anglo-Saxon family. Over time, their descendants inherited a mix of genetic and cultural traits, reflecting the gradual merging of the two groups. These findings reveal a rich and complex picture of Anglo-Saxon society. Migration wasn't just about the movement of people. It was about the exchange of ideas, customs, and traditions that shaped the communities they formed. The story of the Anglo-Saxons reminds us that history isn't just about conflicts or conquests. It's about the connections people make and the ways they adapt to new environments and cultures. This cultural fusion is a key reason why the Anglo-Saxon period remains such a transformative chapter in British history. The legacy of Anglo-Saxon DNA isn't just buried in the past. It's alive in the genetic makeup of modern Britons. Although over 1,000 years have passed since the Anglo-Saxon migrations, their genetic impact remains surprisingly visible. On average, about 30 to 40% of the DNA of modern English people can be traced back to the Anglo-Saxons. This proportion varies significantly across regions. In eastern England, where the Anglo-Saxon settlements were strongest, their genetic influence is the highest. In contrast, as you move westward to areas like Wales, Scotland, and parts of western England, the impact is much smaller, with these regions retaining more of their ancient Celtic ancestry. But what's truly fascinating is how the genetic story didn't stop with the Anglo-Saxons. Over the centuries, other waves of migration and conquest brought new influences. One major contributor was the arrival of people with ancestry linked to France and Belgium, particularly during the Norman period and beyond. Today, this component makes up 20 to 40% of modern English DNA, further blending the genetic tapestry. This ongoing gene flow highlights how migration has always been a defining feature of Britain's history. The Anglo-Saxon migration was one of the largest and most transformative, but it was part of a longer narrative of movement, interaction, and integration. What makes this legacy even more remarkable is how it aligns with cultural patterns. For example, regions with a stronger Anglo-Saxon genetic influence are often the same areas where Old English, the ancestor of modern English, took root most strongly. Even today, subtle differences in regional dialects and traditions reflect the diverse history of migration and cultural exchange. The genetic legacy of the Anglo-Saxons serves as a reminder that modern identities are deeply intertwined with the past. Our DNA is a living record of the migrations, adaptations, and connections that shape the world we live in today. It's a story that continues to unfold, as new genetic studies reveal even more about the people who helped build the foundation of modern Britain. The secrets of Anglo-Saxon DNA didn't come to light overnight. It took groundbreaking advancements in science to unlock the stories hidden in ancient bones. Until recently, much of what we knew about the Anglo-Saxon period came from historical accounts and archaeological findings. But ancient DNA technology has changed everything, allowing us to see history in ways we never thought possible. The process begins with tiny fragments of bone or teeth, often buried for over 1,000 years. Scientists carefully extract DNA using methods designed to preserve its delicate structure. Imagine drilling into a bone no larger than your finger and pulling out microscopic strands of DNA, fragments so ancient they've been damaged by time, environment, and decay. But that's just the start. Once extracted, the DNA is sequenced and compared to genetic profiles from both ancient and modern populations. This is where the real magic happens. By analyzing thousands of genetic markers, researchers can pinpoint where a person's ancestors came from and how they fit into the larger tapestry of human history. The Anglo-Saxon studies were particularly challenging because their DNA isn't vastly different from that of neighboring populations in Europe. The North Sea region, encompassing parts of Denmark, the Netherlands, and Germany, was genetically interconnected, making it difficult to distinguish one group from another. But by analyzing rare mutations and studying nearly 500 ancient genomes, scientists were able to identify the unique genetic signature of the Anglo-Saxons. What these studies revealed was astonishing: a massive influx of people from the continent, bringing with them not only their genes but also their culture. Family trees reconstructed from ancient DNA showed how migrants and locals intermarried, blending their genetic and cultural legacies over generations. This technology didn't just confirm historical accounts, it challenged and refined them. For example, we now know that the Anglo-Saxon migration wasn't just a conquest led by warriors. It was a movement of families, men, women, and children, who settled, integrated, and shaped the future of Britain. Ancient DNA has allowed us to rewrite the story of the Anglo-Saxons, giving us a clearer picture of who they were and how they lived. It's a testament to how science can illuminate the past, uncovering details that were once lost to history. And as techniques continue to improve, who knows what other secrets might still be hidden in the DNA of the long dead? So why does Anglo-Saxon DNA still matter today? The answer lies in what it tells us about migration, identity, and the shared history of humanity. The story of the Anglo-Saxons isn't just a chapter in British history. It's a mirror reflecting how migration has shaped societies across the globe. Their DNA reveals that migration isn't simply about borders or territory. It's about transformation. The Anglo-Saxon arrival didn't just bring new genetics to Britain. It introduced new languages, customs, and technologies that formed the foundation of modern England. But their story also challenges some deeply rooted misconceptions about migration. The evidence shows that it wasn't just a tale of conquerors imposing their culture. Instead, it was a process of integration, adaptation, and cultural exchange. Anglo-Saxon migrants didn't erase what came before them. They blended with it, creating something entirely new. This is a message that resonates today. In an increasingly interconnected world, the story of the Anglo-Saxons reminds us that cultural diversity and genetic mixing have always been part of human history. It shows us that migration is a natural and even transformative force, shaping not just who we are, but who we become. On a scientific level, the study of Anglo-Saxon DNA represents a triumph of modern technology. It's a testament to how far we've come in understanding the past. With just fragments of bone, scientists have reconstructed a story that was once thought to be lost forever. But perhaps the most powerful lesson lies in how these discoveries connect the past to the present. The DNA of the Anglo-Saxons isn't just a record of who they were. It's part of who we are today. Their genetic legacy lives on in millions of modern Britons, a reminder that our history is written not just in books, but in our very genes. So, the next time you think about history, remember this: it's not just something that happened, it's something that lives on, in our cultures, our languages, and even in the DNA that makes us who we are. The legacy of Anglo-Saxon DNA goes far beyond genetics. It's a story of transformation, connection, and identity that continues to shape Britain today. At its core, Anglo-Saxon DNA is a testament to how migrations have the power to redefine entire societies. The Anglo-Saxon arrival didn't just bring new bloodlines to Britain. It laid the groundwork for the English language, social structures, and cultural traditions that still endure. The customs, burial practices, and technologies they introduced didn't simply fade away. They became part of the fabric of English identity. But this legacy is also a reminder of how interconnected our histories are. The Anglo-Saxons were migrants, travelers from the North Sea region who came to Britain in search of new opportunities. Their DNA ties modern Britons not just to this island but to regions like Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. It's a powerful example of how migration has always been a part of humanity's story, bridging distances and connecting cultures. Even today, the impact of Anglo-Saxon DNA is visible. Regions of eastern England still carry a stronger genetic imprint of the Anglo-Saxons, while western areas reflect a more Celtic influence. This genetic diversity is a living record of Britain's complex and layered history. Perhaps what makes their legacy most remarkable is the blend of continuity and change. The Anglo-Saxons didn't erase what came before them. Instead, they became part of a larger, evolving story, a story that includes the Celts, the Romans, the Vikings, and many others. Their DNA is a thread in the rich tapestry of Britain's history, connecting the past to the present in a way that's both tangible and profound. Ultimately, the Anglo-Saxon story reminds us that history isn't static, it's dynamic, evolving, and deeply personal. It's a story of movement, adaptation, and resilience. And thanks to advances in genetic science, we now know that their DNA lives on, not just in the people of Britain, but in the legacy of cultural and social transformation they helped create. So, as we look to the future, the story of the Anglo-Saxons serves as a powerful reminder of the connections that bind us all. Their legacy isn't just about where they came from, it's about what they built, and how their influence continues to shape the world we live in today. The story of Anglo-Saxon DNA is more than just a scientific discovery. It's a window into our shared human history. It reminds us how migration, integration, and cultural exchange have always been essential to the evolution of societies. The Anglo-Saxons weren't just invaders or settlers. They were contributors to a new chapter in Britain's story, leaving behind a genetic and cultural legacy that continues to influence the present. But what makes this story so compelling is how it bridges the past and the present. The advanced technologies used to decode ancient DNA have given us the tools to uncover stories once thought lost to time. They revealed not only where the Anglo-Saxons came from, but also how they lived, how they integrated with local communities, and how their influence endures today. So, what can we learn from this? First, history is rarely as simple as we think. The Anglo-Saxon period wasn't just about conquest or dominance. It was about transformation, collaboration, and resilience. Second, our identities are more interconnected than we realize. The DNA of the Anglo-Saxons serves as a powerful reminder that we are all shaped by migrations and exchanges that stretch back centuries. As we reflect on this, let's ask ourselves, what other stories might be hidden in the DNA of our ancestors? And how might those stories change the way we see ourselves and the world around us? If you found this journey into the past fascinating, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. What surprised you the most about the Anglo-Saxons? And what part of this story do you want to explore further? Let us know. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of history, science, and culture. Until next time, stay curious, because the stories of the past are never truly finished. They are waiting to be discovered.